Welcome, everyone. I'm very excited to introduce you to an incredible acting coach, director, and mentor who's been in the business for 46 years. He goes by the name of Louis Baumander. And I'll give you some context to some of the things he's accomplished in his decades in the business. So over the past 46 years, Louis has directed over 100 plays across Canada in theaters such as Tarragon, the Manitoba Theatre Centre, including Hamlet starring Keanu Reeves, which I would love to ask you some questions about afterwards. He built and ran the Skylight Theatre in Earl Beals Park for 10 years when he directed many of Shakespeare's plays and other classical theatre pieces. He's conducted workshops for numerous actor conferences and maintains an active relationship with the union. He's also directed television and feature film, such as Future Fear. He's been a casting consultant on several TV series and is often called to be an on-set acting coach for projects such as Scary Stories, Titans, Degrassi, and The Strain. Louis has directed, taught, and coached actors such as Shamir Anderson, who you can see in Awake, Goliath, and Race, Nina Dobrev, who you know, of course, from Degrassi and Vampire Diaries, and Ellen Wong, who you know from Scott Pilgrim, Glow, and Condor. He's coached and taught 4 generations of working actors, and just a couple of them would be Nahani Johnstone from Orange is the New Black, Casey Collins, who you know from Saving Hope, Mogadishu, or The Strain, Noah Danby from Killjoys or Bitten, Georgina Riley. I truly could go on and on. He's been in the business for so long, but I'd more like to have a conversation with him. So let's just start. Louis Baumander, how are you?
I'm doing all right. Listening to all of that, it just sounds like my eulogy or something.
Well, luckily you're still here to hear people, you know, sing your praises and thank you for what you've done. And I just love to talk to you. So you've been in the business for decades now. Tell the people listening who might not be familiar with your work, what are some of your philosophies on the craft of acting?
Right. It has changed and evolved over the years. But currently, I would just say, if I had to bring it down to a nutshell, if the goal is to be authentic, and I believe it is, then the only way to be authentic is to be authentic. And then how would you achieve that? Well, learn how to do consciously what you're doing unconsciously anyway. And so most of my work is based on the science of the brain, not on what I would call 19th century, early 20th century concepts. It's a very different world. So over time, I've evolved from that. I'm old enough to have actually attended a workshop with Uta Hagen.
Wow.
So I'm that old. And I'm familiar with Meisner, taught some Meisner in my early years, trained that way. So I've done Meisner method, Uta Hagen's object exercises. So I've done and worked in all of those ways, and that's somehow part of my base kit. And I don't think I could be where I am without the genius and pioneer spirit of those men and women.
So I've
But
never met. I've never had the pleasure of meeting them, but you know, Respect for Acting by Uta Hagen is what I call the acting Bible, and I've had the pleasure. One of my mentors was a Meisner teacher, and the way I describe it is Uta Hagen's text analysis is like the roadmap for any scene you're doing, and Meisner is like the driving skills for being present. So,
yeah, I would agree to a point,
mm-hmm.
And that's where I think I bend off the path a little bit, and where I've got myself into a fair bit of trouble over the years. In that we admire Newton and Galileo and Copernicus, and some of what they had to say still holds today. But along came Einstein and Stephen Hawking, and we live in a very different world. The world that these extraordinary visionaries, and they were visionaries, they took a look at their times, and they looked at the material that the writers were writing, and they looked at the old ways and said, this doesn't work anymore. There's a new medium, there's a new world out there that needs to be paid attention to. and they responded to it. And I would say those great masters, and I don't know, you call them mistresses, I don't know, but those great masters,
Right.
men and women, if they were alive today, would they be teaching Meisner, Uta Hagen, and method? I would argue they wouldn't be. Some of it.
Well, I saw in a previous interview you talked about how we have to learn to be human again.
Mm-hmm.
Is this how would you define that? What do you think they would be teaching, or what is it that you teach that helps us learn to be human again?
Well, I wish they were alive to be teaching what they would be teaching, and I'd be sitting in the front row taking notes because my respect for them is huge. I think they would be looking at a number of things, everything from the digital world in which we live. We don't shoot on film, we shoot digital. Retina display, eye addiction, the speed of editing, the nature of the shot, the motion in camera, how quickly a show is put up. The great masters like Scorsese and Coppola were shooting 2 pages a day.
Yeah. Yeah, gives a lot more room for
2 pages a day.
Yeah, it's amazing.
You had a week, 10 days to prepare for an audition.
Right.
If you were in a play, 4 or 5 weeks rehearsal.
In theater, we today we have 3, which is, it feels very short, but compared to some of the turnaround times in film and TV, it's an incredible amount of time. Now,
I remember 6 weeks when I was training at the Tarragon back in the early 70s.
Mm-hmm.
I remember Bill Glasgow, who found, the Pope of Canadian theater, him in a real state because he didn't know how he was going to do a show in 6 weeks.
Wow.
Because they used to have 8 weeks rehearsal, and they had to cut. Yeah.
How has your coaching technique evolved for these fast times? If somebody comes to you and they say, "I've got an audition in 8 pages tomorrow morning," how would you instruct them?
Well, I mean, in the time we have, I have to just speak in quick metaphor, which I do anyway. But stop trying to paint a Rembrandt. We're painting Picassos. It's focusing on what you need to know now. But let's just be logical here. You wake up in the morning and you sleep in. And damn, I got to get to work. You know that you have to cut some things out in order. So, but sometimes you get up early. So you got a little more time. So really you need a kit that says, see, tension, which is the enemy of creativity, it's when you try to do this amount of work in this amount of time.
Mm.
And so traditional techniques, which if you have the time, let's say they all do work if you had the time.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they do, but let's argue that they do. You're trying to do this and this.
So, is there a particular technique that you would recommend for condensing that time to immerse yourself in a role?
Absolutely. First, it's the power of thought. Again, going back to what I said, it's based on the science of the brain. Nothing travels faster than the speed of thought. And thought occurs in the eye. So you don't have to do emotional recall. One, there's no science to support that. None. And I challenge anyone out there, you don't believe me, you don't believe me. Look it up. Look at the science. No such thing. You cannot feel unless you think.
Interesting. So you see remembering the thought of what an emotion, the sensation of an emotion is.
You just have to have the thought right now.
Have the thought in the moment.
So very quickly, So let's take a look at, let's just take a thought that has occurred to you somewhere in time, maybe not for weeks, maybe not for months, but somewhere in time you had the thought, I don't know what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. Right?
I certainly have, yeah.
Okay, so just look at me straight and just breathe and just say 3 times, I have no idea what I'm going to do with the rest of my life.
You want me to try it right now?
Yeah, just say that to me. Don't do that actory thing and prepare. Just
I have no idea what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. I have no idea what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. I have no idea what I'm going to do for the rest of my life.
Now you see how you just started to experience that?
So it's about being present.
And after the second one, you didn't have the confidence to keep going, so you guessed on the third one.
Interesting. Interesting. I've read that when certain directors will rehearse their actors to the point where they're almost bored of the lines to remove any acting from the performances. They want them to be so present that it's they have the lines, and the lines are internalized to the point where when they speak to each other, there's only the moment right now. They don't have time or desire to try to add anything to their performance. And it sounds like your philosophy is that is the best way to be working.
Yes, and I would argue that David Mamet, who was instrumental for me in breaking me out of the traditional way of working. Because I remember in the first chapter of True and False, there's this completely heretical thought. Stanislavski was a fraud and a poser.
I remember reading that in college.
And I go, holy shit, you just said God sucks, you know?
Well, didn't Mamet also famously say that stand on your mark, clear your throat, and say your lines, and speak the truth? He takes it to the point where it's, which granted, I mean, if you look at the company of actors he's had the great privilege of working with, yes, Alec Baldwin and, you know, all these greats can totally do that. But I would hesitate to give that advice to beginners, but I think essentially that is what it comes down to.
Yes, and but remember, he knew them at the University of Chicago when they were very young, so he trained them that way. They were very young when they started with him.
True.
But yes, I think one of the exercises they do at this studio in New York is you stand nose to nose. I don't know if they still do it, but nose to nose with the other actor. And before you can work on the scene, you got to stand there, odd eye, and go bam, 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 bam. But that requires, so I can accept that as a possibility, a way of working, but that requires time.
Now, you directed Keanu Reeves in a production of Hamlet.
Correct.
What year was this when you directed that production?
I don't know, 92, 93.
Okay, interesting. So this was pre-Matrix Keanu Reeves.
This was Speed Keanu Reeves.
So he was already a massive star. Yeah, I mean, he's been a massive star since Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, okay? Interesting. So now, was there something in the way that he worked and working with somebody who achieved in our industry on that level that you noted in his technique or his process or the way he worked that you could share with other actors who might be working with you as a coach?
Well, I first met him and taught him when he was, I think he was 17 years old. So that's when I started working with Keanu.
Okay.
I've told this story before, but I was directing a production of Romeo and Juliet, a student production up at the Leopold's Theater School, which doesn't exist anymore, but up at Bathurst and Shepherd. And Keanu was a downtown kid. And so it went in Now magazine, I think, looking for young actors in the show. Anyway, I was auditioning an actor for Romeo, and in the middle of that audition, the door opened to the audition room, and in came this young man with hair just black hair down to here, wearing a torn T-shirt and a kilt, and very polite. But he walked right past that actor doing his Romeo audition, and said, "Excuse me," walked right up to the desk where I was sitting, and said, "Sir, I really need to play Mercutio." And at that moment, I was about to, what the, like, but it was true.
Hmm.
I looked at that young man's eyes, and he needed to play Mercutio. There was no doubt in my mind his life depended on it.
And you cast him?
So then, well, just about, but then I said, okay, let me finish with who I'm with, and I got a few more people to see, but after that, I'll see you. And I gave him, I was a bit of a prick, and I gave him the Queen Mab speech, which is one of the most difficult pieces in all of Shakespeare, I would argue. And he would come in again, interrupting people, saying, "Excuse me, what does this word mean?" Or like, this is, you know. Anyway, but I was totally smitten by the fellow, you know, at this point. Anyway, then he came in, and we did it, and it wasn't great. But it was, and if he was going up for Romeo, I might not have cast him, or Benvolio, or even a Hamlet at the time. But that raw energy was so perfect for Mercutio, and I understood why he needed to play Mercutio. So I cast him there, right there on the spot. The producer, artistic director, was not keen on me casting him at that time. He didn't have experience, you know, but I just said, no, this kid's going to be amazing. And he was. Stole the show, as a good Mercutio will. That's why you have to kill them off early in the play, because otherwise even Shakespeare knew that this is the most exciting character in the play.
I had the privilege of playing Mercury Show once as a young actor in Joe Calarco's Shakespeare's R&J. And yeah, I agree with you about the Queen Mab speech, and I agree with you with that role. It can be a scene stealer. Yeah.
So, and we got to know each other fairly well back then, and did continue to work on and off there for a bit. And I, you know, not to make this about the Keanu Reeves story, but I was with him then the night before he was leaving for Los Angeles. And, he had a card, that cardboard, if you lifted it, you could see the road. And he was going around collecting $50 from people for the money to get to Los Angeles. And then was out of touch with him for quite a while. And then I'd get phone calls from anywhere USA every now and again. And then there's some personal stuff involved here that I won't go into, but that led to a discussion about Hamlet, and then us agreeing that where we would do it, and MTC was the best place for us to do it. So that's how that came to be.
I'd imagine that run sold out fairly quickly.
It was sold out before the season even started. In fact, you had to buy a season's ticket to get that ticket.
Amazingly, I remember hearing this story when I was a very young actor. I remember hearing and being fascinated to see what he'd be like in that show. Now, I want to just, so the takeaway for young actors listening who may want to work with you as a coach. So you said you saw something in Keanu, you know, very young, raw Keanu Reeves that transcended even his audition for the role, this complex role, which you said wasn't necessarily great. What was it that he brought to the role that made you cast him, despite the fact that the audition itself wasn't that great?
His entire life, everything that he was at that moment in time came out of him
Mm.
without any hesitation, without any fear, without any doubt, without any shame or embarrassment. Here I am.
So he was so present and so alive that transcended the work itself.
Yeah, those are accurate words. But they seem like acting term words to me. He was just, you were in the presence of somebody who was not afraid to be who they were.
Okay. Authentic then.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, there wasn't a lot of actors when they're auditioning, coaching, they're often like street hustlers. They're hucksters hustling for a part. It's like, please sir, can I have a job? It's like, hey, look at me.
Yep.
What do they want? And trying to,
Yep.
like, you can fake out a casting director with your bullshit, with your clever choices and I'll stand here and wanting to stand out, and you see, because that's all part of, to me, of a language that doesn't belong in this business. Their job is not to own the room, to kill it, to knock it out of the park. Your goal is to come into a room and share something of yourself.
Yeah.
End of story. It's who you are with these words at this moment in time. It's not about calibrating. You see, the whole thing of making strong and interesting choices, which is a common phrase in casting, I would say, well, what kind of a note is that? Why wouldn't you? Of course you would. Like, what, I'm going to make dumb, stupid ones, boring ones? Of course.
Right.
But the most interesting thing about anybody is who they are. You see, we all, our eyes, our cheekbones, our whole structure, our whole being, we're inherently different. We do not have to try to be different. And anyone who tries to be interesting is boring and tedious. And we all know that from our own life experience.
Right.
There's nothing more tedious than someone trying to be clever and interesting.
I would tend to agree.
So
as a parting final takeaway, what kind of actors come to you for coaching, and what should they expect?
Well, there's quite a range. I'm currently working with 2 actors that I've signed NDA agreements for, so I can't say their name or the projects. But one is a lead in a Netflix series being shot right now, and one is in somewhere in Europe, shooting a major feature, mostly A to A- actors in the film. So I'm working obviously at that level as well. Every now and again, an agent will call me and say, Louis, I need you to take this person on, and they're completely new to the business, and the agent sees something in them, and I do too, and I'll pony up for that. And then there are actors I've been working with on and off for 8, 10, 12 years who just are part of my regular group of people that I see. So I do see some new people. most, I see everybody once, and for the most part, at that point, I will often recommend that they go to one of my other coaches, and then at some point that other coach will say, Lewis, I want you to see them again. I think they're ready.
Mhm.
And then I will. So I'll do it that way. And sometimes I'm really selfish and I love them so much and I want this one, and
Right.
I'll just work with them new because there's nothing, that too is still the most exciting part of this job after 46, 47 years is the seeing that new face with that hunger in their eyes, and there's no
Mhm.
bitterness, there's no street hustle
No,
about
no
them,
jade.
there's nothing clever or varnished about them. They're just, this is who they are and this is what they want.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
okay, I can work with that. Because that's what I prefer, because otherwise you spend a lot of time stripping away a lot of um, old layers,
Well,
a lot of old stuff.
pretense, falseness. Yeah, yeah, affectation, if you will. Yeah, great.
Not that they even
Well,
know that
well,
it
thank you.
is, uh,
No, no.
they just got some weird old school ideas, that need to be
Mhm.
dropped out of the equation. So,
Well, great. Thank you very much. I think this will give listeners some great context for who you are and what you do, and I appreciate you taking time to talk to me today about all this. Thank you.
no problem. And do you do the, yeah, if there's, I wouldn't mind doing also if it's within the framework of all of this. Um, I love that interpersonal live question thing too.
I I think you'd be I think that'd be a fascinating conversation, and I'll talk to the producers of
How
the
would
show and
you
let's make that
be,
happen.
right, so this is your, so are you in Vancouver?
I am in Vancouver. I'm originally from Montreal, but I'm from Vancouver.
Right. All right, well, a
Hmm.
delight meeting you.
You as
Um,
well. Thank you.
Talking.
Yeah.
You're a good interviewer.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. It's easy, but when somebody has as much to say and as much, I'd love to do the hour version where we go really in depth, and the audience will get to ask. I'm sure they'll be fascinated. So stay tuned. I'll talk to Britt and see when we can set that up.
All right, you
All right.
take care.
All right. Take care. Thank you.